Darkness hides many secrets, some forgotten, some whispered, and some that were never meant to be uncovered. Tonight, we dive into a story that will make you question what's real and what should remain in the shadows. So, turn off the lights and listen closely, because once you hear this tale, there's no turning back. When I think back to that night, I still feel the same chill crawling down my spine, as if the shadows are waiting for me to remember them. It started so casually, nothing that should have led to terror. My friend Tom had invited me over for the weekend. He had recently bought a house just outside Austin, an old, creaky place tucked into a quiet street that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1950s. I hadn't seen him in years, so we caught up, ordered food, cracked open a couple beers, and talked until it got late. It was well past midnight when I realized I was in no shape to drive home. Tom offered me the guest room upstairs, and I gratefully accepted. The room was plain but cozy, a bed pushed against the wall, a dresser, a single chair in the corner. I remember thinking it felt strangely bare, like someone had just moved in. By 2 a.m, the house was silent. I fell asleep quickly, the comfort of old friendship making the place feel safe. But at some point, something woke me up. I didn't hear a sound, at least not one I can remember. But I opened my eyes in the dark, and that's when I saw it. There was a figure in the corner of the room. At first, I thought it was nothing, maybe a coat hung over the chair. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it looked. It wasn't slouched like clothing draped on furniture. It was upright, tall, watching. My heart started to pound so loudly I thought it would shake the walls. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, even whispered Tom's name, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, silent, heavy, like a shadow given weight. I pulled the blanket to my chin, frozen, and told myself it was a trick of the light. I forced my eyes shut, hoping sleep would wash away the fear. When morning came, sunlight spilled into the room, and the corner was empty. The chair was bare. There was nothing there. I laughed it off over breakfast, telling Tom I thought I saw a coat in the night. He frowned. "There's no coat in that room," he said, "or a rack, or even a closet." I shrugged it off, but unease curled in my stomach. That night, after another evening of stories and drinks, I went back to the same room. I checked the corner before lying down. Nothing, just a chair, empty and harmless. But sometime past 3, I woke again. This time it wasn't silence that woke me. It was the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, creaking against the wooden floorboards of the hallway outside my door. They moved back and forth, as though someone was pacing. Then, softly, the doorknob rattled. I held my breath. After what felt like an eternity, the sound stopped. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, not daring to close my eyes. When Tom came down for breakfast, I asked if he'd been walking around at night. He shook his head. I didn't leave my room. The unease grew sharper, gnawing at me, but I convinced myself I was overtired. Old houses make noises, right? But the third night was different. That night, I didn't fall asleep easily. Every creak of the house made me tense. Every gust of wind made me twitch. Hours passed, and eventually exhaustion dragged me under. When I woke, I already knew something was wrong. The air was thick, too quiet, like the silence itself was holding its breath. I turned my head slowly toward the corner. It was back, the figure. But this time it wasn't still. It leaned forward, shifting, as though it was trying to step out of the shadows and into the dim sliver of moonlight coming through the blinds. Its shape wasn't sharp enough to see clearly, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching, waiting. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. My chest felt locked, my breath shallow. All I could do was lie there, staring, while every second stretched longer and longer. And then, in a blink, it was gone. The corner was empty again. I didn't sleep after that. In the morning, Tom noticed how pale I looked. I told him everything. The figure, the footsteps, the rattling doorknob. He didn't laugh, but he didn't look convinced either. "You sure you weren't dreaming?" he asked. But when I described the shadow in the corner, his face changed. "That room, the last owner's son used to sleep there," he said slowly. "He died in that room. Heart failure at night. They found him in the chair." The image of that empty chair twisted my stomach. I left that day, and I never stayed overnight in Tom's house again. Sometimes, though, when I'm half asleep in my own bed, I get the strangest feeling that if I open my eyes, I'll see it again. The watcher in the corner. It was supposed to be the easiest drive of my life. The highway stretched straight for miles, nothing but open road and flat land on either side. It was late, close to midnight, and I was heading home after visiting a friend. My car's headlights cut through the darkness, the only thing separating me from the black void beyond the pavement. Music played low on the radio, enough to keep me awake, but not enough to distract me. The kind of quiet road trip where your mind starts to wander. I remember thinking about work, about what I'd eat when I got home, about everything except what was about to happen. The first time I saw it, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Up ahead, in the glow of my headlights, there was a figure on the side of the road, just standing there. My stomach dropped. Who the hell would be out here at this hour? As I got closer, I could make out more details. It was tall, too tall, dressed in black, or maybe just swallowed by the night. I couldn't see its face, not clearly, just a pale outline of a head turned slightly toward me. For a split second, I considered stopping, asking if they needed help, but something deep inside screamed don't. The figure wasn't waving me down, wasn't moving at all. It was just standing, motionless, like it had been waiting for me. I pressed the gas and sped past. Relief washed over me, but only for a moment, because when I checked my rear-view mirror, the figure was gone, not walking, not fading into the distance, just gone. I told myself I was tired, that I'd imagined it. I cranked the music louder, rolled down the window to feel the cool night air, and forced myself to focus on the road. But a few miles later, I saw it again. This time, it was on the opposite side of the road. Same exact posture, same unnatural stillness. My headlights painted its shape clearly enough for me to see the angle of its shoulders, the tilt of its head. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles hurt. I didn't slow down, didn't dare. And again, when I glanced in the mirror, the road behind me was empty. My heart was hammering now. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe there were two people out here, maybe some prank. But who would walk miles into the middle of nowhere just to stand on the shoulder of a highway in the dead of night? The third time, it was worse. I saw the figure standing in the middle of the road, dead center, blocking my path. I slammed the brakes so hard my seatbelt dug into my chest. Tires screeched, the car fishtailed, and I came to a shaking stop just yards away from it. My headlights lit it up completely, and I swear to God, it was smiling, not a normal smile. Too wide, too sharp. My hands trembled as I reached the gear shift, ready to throw the car in reverse. But before I could, the figure moved. It didn't walk. It didn't run. It just flickered. 1 second it was there. The next it was gone, like a shadow swallowed by darkness. The road ahead was empty. I sat frozen for a long moment. Engine humming, headlights stretching down the highway like nothing had happened. Then survival instinct kicked in and I floored the gas, desperate to put as much distance as possible between me and whatever I had just seen. But the road wasn't done with me, because as I drove, faster than I should have dared, the shadows at the edge of the highway seemed to move. Shapes flickered just out of sight, like the figure was keeping pace with me, appearing and disappearing between the trees and ditches. Every time I glanced sideways, I swore I caught glimpses of it, standing, waiting, watching. I didn't look in the mirrors anymore. I couldn't. Finally, lights appeared on the horizon, the faint glow of the next town. I sped into the streets, heart pounding, refusing to slow until I pulled into a gas station with bright fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Only then did I feel safe enough to breathe. I sat there for nearly half an hour, hands locked on the steering wheel, headlights fixed on the harmless white walls of the station. I didn't see the figure again, but the drive home from there felt different. The darkness wasn't empty anymore. And sometimes, even now, when I'm on a late-night road with no cars around, I get that same feeling, that someone's already waiting for me, just beyond the reach of my headlights. Some houses are born with secrets, and some collect them over time. My childhood home, I would later learn, had both. I grew up in a small 2-story house in the suburbs. It wasn't anything special. Peeling paint on the shutters, a slanted driveway, and a creaky staircase that my mom always said gave the place character. But there was one part of that house that never felt like it belonged to us. The basement. The basement was unfinished, cold, and always smelled faintly of earth. A single dangling bulb lit the space, and even that barely pierced the heavy shadows and corners. My parents used it for storage, but I hated going down there. Something about the air felt wrong, like I was stepping into a place I wasn't supposed to be. At first, it was little things. When I was around 10, I'd wake up at night and hear faint sounds coming from below, a low thumping, like someone knocking on wood. Sometimes it was a shuffle, sometimes almost a dragging sound. I would bury myself under the covers and convince myself it was just pipes or the house settling. But as I got older, the sounds became harder to ignore. One night, when I was 12, I heard what I swore was whispering. Faint, urgent voices, too soft to understand, but loud enough to make my skin prickle. I told my dad the next morning, but he brushed it off. "Old houses make noises," he said. My mom nodded in agreement. But when I looked closely, I noticed the way she avoided my eyes, like she knew more than she wanted to admit. By 14, I couldn't sleep without music on. The sounds were clearer now, and they seemed to grow louder whenever the house was quiet. Sometimes it sounded like furniture scraping across the floor, though nothing in the basement ever moved. Other times it was a sharp tap, 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 steady and deliberate, as though someone was knocking from the other side of the walls. One night, everything changed. It was late, maybe past 2 in the morning, when the noises started again. I lay awake, headphones dead, and listened as a familiar scraping echoed beneath me. But this time, it didn't stay in the basement. The sound began moving upward. Each scrape, each dragging sound, seemed to climb the staircase that led to the first floor. My chest tightened. I stared at my bedroom door, praying I wouldn't hear it reach the top of the stairs. And then silence. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. My hands shook as I pulled the blanket over my head, trying to calm down. But then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy, measured. They crossed the living room floor. And then they stopped right outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, so long my lungs screamed for air. I don't know how long it stood there. Whatever it was, minutes felt like hours. Finally, the sound retreated, the footsteps dragging back down the stairs until they faded into the basement again. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told my parents what happened. This time, my dad didn't laugh. He just looked at my mom, and she shook her head quickly, like she didn't want to say anything. That day, my dad nailed the basement door shut. He told me it was to keep drafts out, but I wasn't stupid. Something was wrong with that basement, and they knew it. For a while, the noises stopped. Weeks passed in uneasy silence, and I almost convinced myself it had all been in my head. But silence doesn't mean safety. One evening, when I was 16, I came home alone. My parents were out, the sun had just set, and the house felt too big, too empty. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard it. A knock, 3 sharp raps, coming from the basement door. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to run. But something stronger, curiosity, or maybe the pull of whatever lived down there, made me step closer. The door was still nailed shut, but as I leaned in, I heard it again. Knock, 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 and then a whisper. My name. I stumbled back, so fast I nearly fell. My heart was slamming against my ribs. The house felt alive, every shadow pressing in, every creak echoing too loud. That night, when my parents came home, I begged them to tell me the truth. My mom cried, but she wouldn't speak. My dad just said, "Some doors are better left closed." We moved out a year later. My parents claimed the house was too old, too much work to keep up. But deep down, I knew they were running from the same thing I was. I've never gone back. But sometimes late at night, when the world is quiet and I'm drifting off to sleep, I hear it again. 3 knocks, and the sound of my name whispered from just beyond the dark. Mirrors are supposed to reflect reality, but sometimes they show things that shouldn't exist. When I was 17, my grandmother passed away and left me a few of her belongings. Among them was a tall, ornate mirror with a gold frame, carved with twisting vines and faded roses. It was beautiful, the kind of antique people paid good money for, but there was something unsettling about it. The glass wasn't perfectly clear. It seemed darker, almost like it held a shadow within it. Still, I kept it in my room. At first, it was just another piece of furniture. I'd check my hair before school, glance at it before bed. Nothing strange, nothing unusual, until the first night. I woke around 3 a.m., my throat dry. As I reached for a glass of water on my nightstand, my eyes drifted toward the mirror, and that's when I saw her. There was a woman standing in the reflection. She wasn't me. Her skin was pale, her hair long and dark, her eyes so black they looked like voids. She wore a dress that seemed decades old, something from another time. I froze, staring at the glass, waiting for her to move. But she didn't. She just stood there, watching me, while the real space behind me remained empty. When I blinked, she was gone. I told myself it was a trick of my sleepy brain, nothing more. But the next night, she returned. Same time, same place, her hollow eyes fixed on me. Sometimes her lips moved, like she was whispering words I couldn't hear. Other times her head tilted, as if she was studying me, deciding something. I stopped sleeping well. Every night I woke, and every night she was there. One night, I decided to test it. Heart pounding, I sat up in bed and raised my hand toward the mirror. In the reflection, the woman did the same. But there was a delay, just a fraction of a second. It wasn't a reflection. The realization hit me so hard I stumbled back. My lamp flickered. The air grew icy, and I swore I heard a faint laugh, soft and broken, echoing from the glass. After that, things got worse. During the day, I started noticing little changes in the mirror. Sometimes the reflection of my room didn't match reality. A picture frame missing, a chair turned the wrong way. Other times, when I walked past, I caught her shadow lingering just behind mine. And at night, her presence grew bolder. She began pressing her hands against the inside of the glass, leaving faint, foggy prints that wouldn't wipe away. Once, I woke to the sound of scratching, and when I looked, her nails were dragging across the inside of the mirror, long lines etched into the glass. I told my parents, but they laughed it off. Too many horror movies, my dad said, but my mom's face paled when I mentioned the woman's black eyes. She whispered something about my grandmother, then quickly changed the subject. I knew then that my grandmother must have known what the mirror really was. One night, it all came to a breaking point. I woke not because of thirst or dreams, but because I felt watched. My body was stiff, heavy, like the air itself was pressing down on me. Slowly, I turned toward the mirror. She wasn't just standing there anymore. She was halfway through. Her arms were stretched out of glass, fingers long and claw-like, gripping the edge of the frame. Her face was twisted into something inhuman, her mouth stretched into a grin far too wide. I screamed, but no sound came out. My body refused to move as she pulled herself closer, her black eyes locked on mine. And then, just as her head began to push through, the mirror cracked. A sharp, splitting sound filled the room, and the glass fractured down the center. The woman's figure vanished, sucked back into the darkness as the reflection warped and shattered. I ran from the room and didn't go back until morning. When I finally returned, the mirror was still there, broken, but no longer showing anything unusual, just my tired, pale reflection staring back at me. My parents helped me take it to the curb for the garbage truck, but I swear, as we carried it out, I felt the glass pulsing under my hands, like a heartbeat. We left it on the street, shards glinting in the sun, and I never saw it again. But sometimes in certain mirrors, a bathroom, a store fitting room, even a car side view, I think I catch her watching me, her black eyes staring from just behind the glass, waiting for another chance to step through. Traveling for work had become routine for me. Airports, taxis, hotels. The cycle repeated so often that one city blurred into the next. I never thought much about the places I stayed. A bed, a shower, Wi-Fi, that was all I needed. But there's one hotel room I'll never forget. It was in a mid-sized town I'd never heard of before, the kind of place you stop in on the way to somewhere else. I checked into a small, old-fashioned hotel late at night. The lobby smelled faintly of dust and polish, and the receptionist barely looked up as he slid me my key. "Room 6, end of the hall," he muttered. His voice had no warmth, just mechanical disinterest. The hallway was dim, the patterned carpet worn thin in the middle, the wallpaper peeled in spots, revealing cracked plaster beneath. My room door stuck a little before it opened, as if it didn't want me inside. The room itself looked ordinary at first glance. Queen bed, wooden desk, heavy curtains, and a tall dresser. But the air fell off. Thick, stale, like no one had opened a window in years. I shrugged it off, too tired to care. I set down my bag, turned on the TV for background noise, and collapsed onto the bed. At around 2 a.m., I woke to silence. The TV was off, though I never touched the remote. The room was pitch black, except for the red glow of the alarm clock. That's when I noticed it. The sound of breathing. Slow, steady, not my own. I sat up, my heart hammering. The sound came from the far side of the room, near the dresser. My eyes adjusted, and I swore I saw a shadow move, tall, human-shaped, darker than the rest of the room. I flicked on the lamp. The space was empty. The dresser stood against the wall. Nothing unusual about it. Shaking. I told myself it was just a dream. I left the lamp on and forced myself back to sleep. But the next night, it happened again. I woke around the same time, the same heavy silence pressing down on me. The lamp was off this time, though I knew I hadn't touched it. And the breathing was back. Only now it was closer, right beside the bed. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. All I could do was stare into the dark, waiting for my eyes to adjust. But the blackness didn't give up its secrets. I lay frozen until the first weak light of dawn crept through the curtains. In the morning, I went to the receptionist. I tried to laugh it off, make it casual. "Strange question," I said, "but has anyone ever complained about room 6? He looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he said flatly, "You should switch rooms." That was it. No explanation, no smile, just those words. I should have left then. Packed my bags, checked out, never looked back. But something stubborn, maybe pride, maybe curiosity, made me stay. On the third night, I prepared. I left the lamp on, the TV running, even stacked a chair against the door. I wasn't going to be caught off guard. At 3 a.m., the TV clicked off. The lamp followed. The room drowned in darkness. And then the breathing returned. This time, I didn't just hear it. I felt it, warm, damp air brushing against my face, like someone was leaning over me. My skin crawled, every instinct screaming to run, but I couldn't move. I forced myself to turn my head, and that's when I saw her, a woman crouched beside the bed, her face inches from mine. Her skin was gray, sagging, her eyes clouded and sunken. She smiled a horrible, broken smile and whispered something I couldn't understand. Her voice was like air escaping a grave. I lunged back, hitting the headboard, fumbling for the lamp switch. When the light snapped on, the room was empty. The next morning, I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my bag, checked out, and drove as far and as fast as I could. But the memory of that whisper has never left me. Sometimes when I'm in another hotel, drifting off to sleep, I hear it again. A woman's voice in the dark, breathing close, too close. And I wonder if room 6 ever really let me leave. Deep in the countryside of Massachusetts, where fog clings to the rolling hills, and the woods seem to whisper, lies the crumbling ruin of Ravenswood Asylum. Built in the late 1800s, it was once hailed as a beacon of modern psychiatric care. In reality, it became a place of unspeakable cruelty and suffering. Today, the asylum stands abandoned, but the stories that swirl around it are darker than the shadows that cover its shattered windows. The history: when Ravenswood opened its doors in 1883, it was overcrowded within months. Men and women with mild mental health issues were housed alongside violent criminals. Treatments were primitive: ice baths, electroshock therapy, and forced isolation in pitch-black cells. The asylum's director, Dr. Horace Whitlock, was praised publicly for his progressive methods, but privately, he was known to experiment on patients, using them as subjects for his twisted research. By the early 1900s, the asylum's death toll was staggering. Many patients simply disappeared. Records showed their admittance, but no date of release or death. Nurses whispered that the basement tunnels were filled with the bones of those who never made it out. In 1921, a fire swept through part of the West Wing. Dozens of patients, locked in their rooms, burned alive. But instead of closing, the asylum rebuilt and continued to operate until 1964, when a state investigation uncovered decades of abuse. Ravenswood was shut down, its staff dispersed, and its records sealed. The present day. For decades, thrill seekers, paranormal investigators, and vandals have broken into Ravenswood. Many don't last long. Strange lights, disembodied voices, and the sound of chains dragging across the floors are common. More than once, police were called to rescue explorers who claimed they couldn't find their way out, despite the asylum being a single rectangular structure. One story in particular made national headlines in 2002. A group of college students entered Ravenswood on Halloween night with cameras, planning to film a documentary. Only 2 made it out. They were found wandering the nearby woods at dawn, barefoot and hysterical. Their footage showed them entering the asylum, laughing and joking, but halfway through, the audio filled with screaming. The last frames before the tape cut to static showed a dark figure rushing toward a lens. The 2 survivors refused to speak of what they saw, and the others were never found. The urban legends. Locals say the asylum is cursed. They speak of the Screamer, a ghostly patient whose wails echo through the halls at night, so loud they can be heard from the nearby town. Others talk about the shadow men, tall, black silhouettes that patrol the corridors, hunting anyone foolish enough to intrude. But the most chilling tale is that of Dr. Whitlock himself. His body was never found after the asylum closed. Some believe he sealed himself in the underground tunnels, continuing his experiments in death. Those who claim to have seen his apparition describe a gaunt figure in a blood-stained doctor's coat, holding a rusty scalpel. They say if you hear his voice whispering your name in the dark, you will never make it out alive. A first-hand account. In 2018, paranormal investigator Marissa Cole led a small team into Ravenswood for a live stream event. Thousands of viewers watched as they entered the asylum, equipped with thermal cameras and EVP recorders. For the first hour, nothing happened, just dust, decay, and silence. Then, one by one, their equipment began to fail. The live stream cut in and out, but viewers swore they heard a man's voice whispering, "Stay." Moments later, one of the investigators screamed, and the camera fell to the floor. The final shot before the stream went dead showed a figure standing at the end of the hallway, tall, thin, and motionless. The team stumbled out of the asylum hours later, pale and shaken. Marissa never spoke publicly about the event again, and her team disbanded soon after. The truth? Is Ravenswood truly haunted, or is it just a perfect storm of history, tragedy, and imagination? Skeptics argue the asylum's legends are nothing more than exaggerated ghost stories. But believers insist that so much pain and suffering cannot simply vanish. It leaves a stain, an echo, a haunting that refuses to be silenced. Even today, few dare to go near the asylum after nightfall. Its windows glow with a pale reflection of the moon, and its broken doors swing in the wind as though inviting the curious inside. But those who have entered warn. Once you step into Ravenswood, it feels like the asylum itself is watching you, waiting, and deciding whether you'll ever leave again. And sometimes, the shadows inside don't stay behind. When you walk out, they follow. That was the story of Story Title. But tell me, Do you believe it's just a legend, or could something like this still linger in the dark corners of our world? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more terrifying stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me next time for another journey into the unknown.